The command bridge of the Zalari dreadnought Sovereign Dawn went dead silent. Admiral Therek Vurn, veteran of 3 galactic campaigns, breaker of the Corvanti Rebellion, destroyer of 14 war worlds, stood frozen in place, his twin hearts thudding like war drums. The holographic image flickered in front of him, taken from deep space recon. What hovered there in that dark void? It was impossible, illegal, extinct. "Identify the vessel," he snapped, voice tighter than steel wire. The ship's outline was crude, jagged, a relic of ancient tech. No elegant curves like the Empire's vessels, no clean fusion signatures. Its hull was covered in scorched armor plates, many mismatched, bearing the scars of weapons not seen in centuries, but the silhouette was unmistakable. The computer tried to parse it, failed. The sensor officer looked up, pale, voice cracking. "Sir, it matches old Terran design. Human. Late pre-purge era." Everyone in the room turned toward him. No one spoke. The Admiral stepped closer, eyes scanning every pixel of the holo. The ship wasn't broadcasting any ID. No IFF, no comms, no beacon. Just pure, undiluted silence, and the slow, hungry drift of a beast made for war. "Humans are extinct," Vern said flatly. Silence answered him. "Are they not?" he asked louder. The science officer swallowed. "They were declared extinct 112 cycles ago, after the purge. There were no survivors, no colonies left unscorched." "Then explain to me why there is a Terran battleship 10 light minutes from Imperial border space." No one could, because they'd all learned the same thing. Earth died screaming. Its people burned, its cities crushed, its fleets annihilated. It was punishment, swift and absolute, for defying the Galactic Accord, for trying to go their own way. The galaxy made an example of Earth. They weren't supposed to come back. And yet, there it was. A ship. Dark, lifeless on the outside, but powered. Moving. It was angled straight toward the heart of the Empire. He'd been born in the underbelly of Outpost 23, a hollowed-out asteroid deep in the forbidden zones, beyond charted space. His mother died during a solar flare breach. His father was a ghost, a soldier who spoke of a blue planet that once stood free. He never saw Earth, neither did any of the others. But he remembered the stories, the pain, the betrayal, and the face of the Empire officer who ordered his brother spaced for speaking Old Terran in public. He had no name now, just a designation, Commander of the Revenant. And a purpose. As he stood in the command bay of the ship, his fingertips ran across the cold steel of the railing. The vessel around him groaned like a waking monster. Every panel, every wire, every rusted piston had been salvaged, reforged, modified in secret. They'd taken scraps of old Earth tech and buried alien code into its systems, hidden in the shadows, hunted by machines that thought they'd wiped them all out. But they'd survived, and they had built one ship, just one, not to escape, not to plead, to remind. The voice of his second officer crackled through the comms. "Sir, we're in sensor range of the nearest Imperial patrol. Their dreadnought has spotted us." He smiled, slow, dark, bitter. "Let them look. They're hailing, audio only." He nodded. The channel hissed alive. "This is Admiral Therek Vurn of the Galactic Empire. You are in restricted space. Identify yourself immediately or be met with force." He leaned in. "No need for names, Admiral," he said coldly. "You already know who we are." The line went silent for a beat too long. Then came the voice again, cautious now. "That ship, that design, you can't be human." He smiled again, deeper this time. The kind of smile that came from generations of loss and buried vengeance. "Oh, we're worse than human now." He cut the channel, turned to his helmsman. Fire up the primary cannon, target their engines. But sir, I said engines. Leave them alive. Let them crawl back to their empire. He looked out at the stars, eyes hard. It's time the galaxy remembered what it buried. The blast that tore through the vacuum between the ships didn't make a sound. Space was silent like a graveyard. But on the bridge of the Sovereign Dawn, it may as well have been a scream. Alarms flared. Lights pulsed red. The entire command deck jolted sideways as inertia dampeners struggled to keep up. Admiral Verne slammed into the rail. "Status!" he barked, catching himself before falling. "Direct hit! Engine array crippled!" shouted the tactical officer, her hands flying across the interface. "We've lost main propulsion and partial maneuvering. They knew exactly where to strike." The image of the enemy ship still hovered above them. That cursed silhouette, brutal and primal, drifted forward like a predator stalking a crippled animal. The Empire's most advanced dreadnought, stuck in space like a stone. "This is impossible," Verne whispered. "They shouldn't be able to punch through our shields." "They didn't," the weapons officer said, his face pale. "Sir, they didn't even use plasma. It was a kinetic slug." Verne froze. "Kinetic?" He turned slowly. "Like solid metal?" "Yes, sir. Primitive mass driver. A slug the size of a freighter, traveling at relativistic speed. It tore through our shields like they weren't even there." Verne gritted his teeth. Primitive tech. Crude. Outdated. And it had just crippled one of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. His command deck was filled with silence again. Fear. Real fear. "Get me the Emperor," he said, voice low. No one argued. Far below them, aboard the human ship, the Revenant, the bridge was dead calm. The crew didn't cheer. They didn't gloat. The first blood drawn wasn't a victory. It was a warning. "Enemy propulsion is offline," said the helmsman. "Their comms are jammed. They're drifting." The commander stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. His eyes didn't blink as he stared at the tactical readouts. His jaw clenched once, then settled. He felt nothing. No joy, no thrill, just the cold satisfaction of momentum. Long overdue. "How long before the rest of the sector fleet gets wind?" he asked. 20 minutes, max." The dreadnought's emergency beacon triggered just before we hit them. He nodded. "Good. Let them come." His second-in-command, a hardened woman with a jagged scar running across her neck, leaned forward. "We can't take on the whole sector fleet, not with one ship." He turned slightly. "Who said anything about taking them on?" Her brow furrowed. He walked forward, slow, deliberate steps echoing on steel. "There's a refinery moon 2 systems away. Imperial garrison. Weapons cache. That's our next stop." She stared at him. "We're not staying to finish the dreadnought?" "No." "But—" He glanced at her just once. She fell silent. "We're not here for trophies. We're here to be seen, to remind them of what they buried." He turned to the comms officer. "Patch me through to the crew." A sharp click. "This is the commander." His voice echoed through every level of the Revenant, from the bridge to the engine bay, to the old barracks deep in the belly of the beast. "Our first shot has been fired, a shot they never saw coming. Let that sink in." He paused, the silence doing more than words ever could. They forgot we exist. They forgot the screams of Earth. They forgot the ash, the bones, the betrayals. They built a galaxy where our name is a curse, our past a redacted file, our people a warning. He stepped closer to the console, leaning forward like he was talking to every single crew member face to face. "But we remember, and as of now, they will too." He cut the transmission. Back in Imperial space, on the throne world of Velkaran Prime, the Emperor watched the footage in silence. The video played on a loop, the silhouette of the human battleship tearing through the void, then the camera shaking violently as the kinetic round slammed into the dreadnought's engines. He watched it 5 times. No emotion. No words. His advisors stood behind him, terrified to speak. Finally he stood. "We killed them," he said. "Yes, Your Radiance," one of the ministers said quickly. "We cleansed their world, vaporized the archives, hunted their colonies. Their last fleet was destroyed over a century ago." The Emperor turned his eyes, cold, inhuman, toward him. "Then what is that ship?" No answer. "I want a full report, every record. Dig into the forbidden archives. Declassify the purge logs if you must. I want to know how a Terran warship exists and who is commanding it." "Yes, Your Radiance." He turned back to the screen. "Reinforce the sector, seal the borders, and send the Inquisitors." Inside the Revenant, down below the bridge, in the gunnery bay, a man sat alone, wiping down a thick slab of steel. His name was Rick, though names didn't mean much anymore. He'd been 10 years old when the Empire's bounty hunters slaughtered his family on a mining outpost for spreading sedition. He watched his father die with a pickaxe in his hand, trying to protect them. Since then, Rick had never forgotten one thing. No one was coming to save them. Now, as the gunner of the Revenant, he was the closest thing to justice his people would ever know. "Targeting calibration complete," a voice called out behind him, a young tech boy with too much energy. Rick nodded but didn't answer. He just kept cleaning the cannon's barrel, polished steel and old Terran rage. He didn't fight for glory. He fought for ghosts. 20 light minutes away, the refinery moon, named Halver 9, flickered on long-range scanners. Massive ringed industrial zones, layered atmosphere, mining tunnels that went miles deep. It processed plasma for half the sector and stored weapon stockpiles for the Empire's frontline troops. The Revenant dropped into sublight speed just beyond its sensor net. Inside the command room, the crew gathered around. "Recon shows low defense systems," the tactical officer said. "1 cruiser in dock, garrison of 200. Mostly workers, a few squads of mech guards." The commander nodded. "We disable the comms array, destroy the depot, leave a message." He turned to the pilot. "Bring us in low, under the station's scan net. We'll ride their orbital clutter." A second officer grinned. "Good old Earth tactics." The commander's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "No, human tactics. Earth died. We didn't." The assault was brutal, surgical. The Revenant's stealth modules held long enough to get within strike range. Rick unleashed 2 kinetic shells directly into the communications tower. It didn't explode. It ceased to exist. Then came the drop ships, 2 of them, old rusted carriers, retrofitted with illegal cloaking devices and burn-in engines. They landed in the depot sector like lightning, troops pouring out in full environmental armor. Silent, efficient, relentless. The depot guards barely had time to raise weapons before they were dropped with EMP shock rounds and high-impact darts. Rick was on the ground too, rifle in hand, face behind a cracked visor, jaw tight. He moved like a ghost, clearing the control room with brutal precision. His team placed charges. No time for loot, no hostages, no negotiations. As the charges were primed, one worker, a young Imperial-born technician, tried to run. Rick caught him against the wall, rifle pressed to his neck. "I have a family, please, don't—" Rick didn't speak. He stared at the man, trembling, weak. Exactly the kind of man the Empire had turned the galaxy into. Rick lowered the rifle. "You remember Earth?" he asked quietly. The man blinked. "Earth? The planet the Empire erased from your history books. I don't—" Rick raised his hand, not in anger, but in finality. "Then this is justice." He pulled the trigger. The Revenant rose from Halvar 9's orbit in a trail of black smoke and shattered metal. The depot detonated behind it in a chain reaction that could be seen from the moon's surface, a flaming crater where Imperial pride once stood. On the bridge, the crew watched in silence. The commander didn't speak. He just stared at the screen as the explosion widened. "That's 2 hits," the second-in-command said softly. "2 clean blows. The sector fleet will be hunting us now." "Let them," he said. "Every ship they send, every system they tighten, every broadcast they release, it all leads to one truth." "What truth?" He turned slowly to face her. "That humans are back. And we're not hiding anymore." The story of the attack spread faster than Imperial censors could contain it. Pirate channels, fringe broadcasts, smuggler relays. A single name began to echo across the outer systems. The Revenant, the ship that shouldn't exist, the humans who weren't dead, the fire that refused to go out. And on Velkarin Prime, the Emperor stood before a dark vault in the palace archives. A forbidden wing, sealed since the days of the Purge. 2 Inquisitors stood behind him, tall, pale, their eyes glowing. "Break it open," he said coldly. They obeyed. Behind the vault doors were ancient files, images, audio logs, reports stamped with the Terran Resistance insignia. The Emperor stepped forward. There, in the shadows of the past, a single file sat untouched, its label scorched. "Project, Ghost Sun." He opened it, and his eyes widened for the first time in over 100 years. The holoscreen flickered in the dim glow of the forbidden archive. Dust swirled in the air, lit by the blue flicker of a century-old file. "Project, Ghost Sun." The Emperor's eyes, long devoid of warmth or fear, flicked back and forth as the file opened piece by piece. No one spoke. Not the Inquisitors behind him, not the trembling Minister of Records standing off to the side, his lips dry and cracked from the recycled air. It began with an image. A child, barely 9, strapped into a reinforced chamber, surrounded by machinery that looked ancient and brutal. Not alien. Terran. Lines of code scrolled beside the image. Genetic variants, high cognitive score, maxed emotional suppression, in progress kill conditioning, 84% completion. The Emperor said nothing, but something behind his eyes shifted. The minister licked his lips. "This was one of the final Terran Black Ops programs, before the Purge." The Emperor's voice was a low whisper. "How many units survived?" The minister looked down. "None, that we know of. We believed the facilities were destroyed. The program collapsed during the orbital sieges." The holo kept playing. It showed children, starved, shaved, emotionless, marching in silence. Not a single smile, no play, only drills, guns. Commands barked in a harsh, guttural tongue. Train them like predators, break their bonds, break their gods, leave nothing human but the body. That was the motto. At the end of the feed was one face. Older now, sharper jaw, burned into memory, the commander of the Revenant. "Impossible," the Emperor whispered. The screen read, "Subject 9A, codename Revenant, status MIA after facility collapse." Presumed dead. The Inquisitor leaned forward. "He didn't die." "No," the Emperor murmured. "He became exactly what we feared he would." He turned sharply. "Activate high alert. Assign full sector fleets to interdiction. No more warnings, no more messages. If you see the Revenant, you destroy it." Deep in the Revenant's lower decks, a young man named Torin sat alone in the engineering crawl space, welding a coolant pipe shut with a handheld arc torch. Sparks hissed. The ship groaned around him. He hated the quiet. It reminded him of the mines he grew up in, deep inside an abandoned asteroid field, hiding from Imperial scanners, surviving off engine grease and stale protein slabs. His mother died from plasma lung before he turned 12. He hadn't cried. There was no time for crying when survival was measured in air filters and reactor leaks. Now, he kept the Revenant breathing, not because he believed in some noble cause, but because it was all he had left. The pipe sealed. He leaned back, wiping sweat and metal dust from his face. His hair was shaved down to a ragged buzz. His eyes, hollow. He'd never seen Earth, only fragments. Songs sung in dark corridors, stories whispered about blue skies and green trees. But none of it felt real. Not like the hum of the reactors, the cold steel under his fingers. Someone crawled into the bay behind him. "Water's rationed," said a voice, low, sharp, female. It was Nira, one of the ship's internal security leads. Her face was hard, lined with old burn scars. She didn't smile often. Torin didn't answer. Just took another sip anyway. She crouched beside him. "Fleet's moving." He raised an eyebrow. "They're pissed," she continued. "We tapped an old recon signal, 20 ships, heavy class. They're sweeping the trade routes, hammer formation." He nodded. "Commander knows?" He knew before they even moved. "Bastard never sleeps." Torin smirked faintly. It faded fast. "You think we can win?" he asked. She leaned back, looking up through a small viewport showing nothing but stars and black. "Doesn't matter," she said. "They made us into ghosts. Now they have to remember what ghosts can do." Back on Velkarin Prime, at the Military Command Citadel, a new figure entered the war room. She was tall, lean. Her face was sharp like a blade, hair cut short, armor black with red insignia. Admiral Tal Dravik. The room fell silent. Not because of her rank, but because of her history. She had fought in the last purge 70 years ago. She was the last surviving Imperial officer to have stood ground during the final battle above Mars, when the Terran resistance made their final stand and were bombarded into extinction. Except, now they weren't extinct, were they? The Supreme Tactician stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Admiral Dravik, the Emperor has reinstated your field commission. You're to lead the response fleet and eliminate the Revenant." Dravik studied the tactical projections, the last known movement of the Terran ship, debris trails, wreckage patterns, explosion radii. They were leaving a clear trail. "No cloaking," she said. "No, ma'am. No comms. No propaganda. No." She narrowed her eyes. "They want us to follow." The tactician nodded. "It's bait." She studied the images of the Revenant again. Rough, ugly, deadly. It wasn't a ship built for survival. It was built for revenge. "They know we're watching. Every strike is a memory, a message." She zoomed in on a small visual frame, graffiti burned into the side of a destroyed depot from Halvar 9. "Earth still breathes." She stared at it for a long time. "I fought them before," she said. "They don't run, they don't beg, they burn everything down on the way out." "Your orders?" She turned. "We don't chase them. We outmaneuver. Track fuel signatures, predict their strikes, think like they think." She paused. "And if I'm right, their next target is the beacon array on Sirius Relay Delta. It's how the Empire controls the intercom grid. If they hit that, they cut off half the core systems from each other." Dravik's eyes hardened. "I want the 5th Legion fleet in orbit within 2 days. Set a trap." Back aboard the Revenant, the commander stood in his private chamber, staring at a cracked photo. Faded. Torn. Old Earth tech. A woman. Laughing. Hair blowing in the wind. His mother. Before the purge, before the camps, before the war turned her son into a weapon. He could barely remember her voice now, just the sound of sirens, gunshots, screams, the choking smoke when the Empire's drones descended like locusts. He folded the photo back into a small metal locket and tucked it inside his armor. A knock at the door. "Enter." It was Rick. "The relay station is within range," Rick said. "Sirius Delta." The commander nodded. "They're expecting us." "Good. You hungry for blood, Rick?" The older man didn't smile. "I'm hungry for history." The commander walked over to the console, pulled up the station schematics. "It's too large to destroy clean. We'll sever the power core, fry the relay uplink, drop their comnet. And after that?" He looked at Rick. "Then we vanish." Rick crossed his arms. "We keep vanishing. We'll run out of time." "We already ran out of time," the commander said. This is the afterburn." Rick nodded once, then turned to leave. But before he did, he paused. "Commander." "Yes?" "They're not just scared anymore." The commander raised an eyebrow. "They're pissed and desperate people make mistakes." The commander stared at the blinking cursor on the relay map. "Let's make sure they regret everyone." In orbit above Sirius Relay Delta, the 5th Legion fleet was already in formation. Dozens of cruisers, carriers, frigates, drones, all waiting for a ghost. Dravik stood on her flagship, eyes locked to the sensor grid. Her second officer approached. "Nothing yet. Maybe they changed course." "No, they'll come. And if they don't? They'll hit something worse, somewhere we're not." "Why here?" She turned slowly. "Because if I was him, if I'd been left to die, erased, hunted, broken, I wouldn't be looking to win." She walked to the viewport, staring into space. "I'd be looking to make the galaxy feel like I felt." And somewhere, just beyond the edge of detection, hidden in the glare of a collapsing sun, the Revenant drifted in perfect silence, awaiting its moment. One last spark, ready to ignite an empire. The Revenant drifted in low orbit beneath the fractured light of the Sirius sun, its heat filtered by the ship's old composite shielding, patched a dozen times with salvaged hull from forgotten wars. From a distance, it looked dead, a forgotten husk of metal caught in gravitational drift. But inside, it breathed, and it was listening. "Relay Delta's broadcasting," Nira said, crouched over a comms terminal. "Civilian traffic masking military coordination pulses. They've hidden their fleet well." The commander stood behind her, arms folded, eyes locked on the data feed. "Pulse frequency? 6 seconds apart, tightly encrypted, but it's Empire grade, high priority." He nodded. "They're waiting." Rick leaned against the rail, chewing the inside of his cheek. "It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," the commander said. "So we walk right into it?" He turned to Rick. "No, we tear it apart from the inside." The room quieted. Torin piped up from the far corner. "How the hell do we infiltrate a relay station crawling with Imperial military and half the 5th Legion overhead?" The commander looked at him, calm. "We don't go through them." He pointed to the relay's schematics projected in the air, lines of rotating geometry and access tunnels. "We go beneath them." Sirius Relay Delta wasn't just a station, it was a floating fortress, nearly 20 kilometers long, with an internal supercore reactor built into an asteroid shell. It was designed to be self-sustaining for 50 years, food, fuel, gravity, power, everything. But its heart? Still Terran-built. Before the Purge, the Empire hadn't developed its own communication relays yet. They used what humanity had given them, back when Earth still believed in alliance and hope. That was their mistake, and now it was their weakness. The commander knew it. "Section 9, he said. "Old Terran maintenance tunnels, decommissioned, forgotten, no active sensor lines." Rick shook his head. We don't even know if they're still intact. They are, the commander replied. I was trained in those tunnels. 30 minutes later, the dropship launched. Rick, Nira, Torin, 2 recon scouts, and the commander himself. The Revenant would remain in deep stealth orbit, masked by the local radiation belt. If the op failed, the ship would vanish, and the rest of the crew would scatter like ghosts into deep space. Inside the dropship, tension was thick. The closer they got to Relay Delta, the more the crew could feel it. Not just danger, but gravity. Not from the sun or the relay, from the past. Torin sat silently beside the forward hatch, hands trembling on his pulse rifle. He wasn't trained for infiltration. He was an engineer, a survivor, not a killer. But he was here because survival had never been a clean game. The commander watched him for a moment. You don't have to come, he said. Torin looked up. You gave me a place on your ship. That's more than the Empire ever gave me. The commander nodded once. We breach in 30 seconds, Nira called. On the Imperial flagship above the relay, Admiral Tal Dravik stared at the holomap in silence. Nothing. No ships, no contact, no pings. This isn't right, her second-in-command said. They should have engaged by now. They're not coming through the front, she said. She turned toward the projection of the station interior, pulled up the old Terran schematics. There, a faint heat signature flickering in the maintenance zone. She tapped the screen. Lockdown Section 9, now. Ma'am? I said now. The dropship slammed into the old docking port like a hammer, magnetic clamps fusing it to the hull. A loud hiss as pressure equalized. The airlock screeched open. Gunfire greeted them. A squad of Imperial guards was already waiting, rifles hot, mech armor engaged. Ambush! Rick shouted, throwing himself sideways as a pulse blast shattered the bulkhead behind him. Nira went down to one knee, 2 shots to center mass. 2 Imperials crumpled. Torin dove for cover, shaking, fumbling with his rifle. The commander moved like a machine. Short bursts, each shot lethal, controlled. His movements were too precise to be chance. He wasn't reacting. He was predicting. Within seconds, the corridor was clear. Rick groaned. So much for stealth. We were never invisible, the commander replied. Just underestimated. They moved quickly through the tight tunnels. Old Terran corridors, still lined with rusted panels marked with Earth script. Torin paused as they passed one. Signal is the soul. Keep the line open. He touched the wall. Move, Rick barked. They reached the relay core, a massive circular chamber pulsing with raw data flow, cables like veins across the walls. Nira pulled a pack from her shoulder. Charge is set. EMP burst will fry everything from relay uplink to the secondary grid. Nothing gets in or out of this sector for days. The commander nodded. Do it. She pressed the charge. 30 seconds. That's when they heard it. Claps, slow, echoing. A figure stepped out from the far corridor. Admiral Dravik. No armor, no escort, just her, and a hollow pistol at her side. You always were efficient, she said. The commander froze. Rick raised his rifle. She followed us. Let me drop her. No. He stepped forward. I know you, he said, eyes narrowing. You should, she replied. You were a weapon I helped create. The crew stiffened. Project Ghost Sun, she continued. I was a liaison between your handlers and the Empire's science division. I saw your psych reports, your kill metrics. You were beautiful. In a monstrous way. Nira moved forward. She's stalling. I'm not, Dravik said, eyes still on the commander. I came to offer you something. He didn't speak. You're winning battles, she said, but you can't win the war. We will bury you again, and this time there will be no revenant, no legends, Just ash. He stared at her, calm. I don't need to win the war, he said. I just need to make sure your empire bleeds. Dravik nodded. Then you're no better than what we said you were. I'm not trying to be better. She took a step closer. You were a child. You never had a choice. They broke you before you could think. He didn't move. I'm giving you one now. And that is? Let the others go. The boy, the girl, the old soldier. Walk away. I'll give you a corridor out. You can disappear, into the outer systems. Live, die, doesn't matter. But you end it here. He stared at her, emotionless. You think this is about my life? Dravik tilted her head. He stepped forward. My mother begged for her life in front of an Empire drone. I watched her lungs collapse under a gas attack meant for insurgents. My father, tortured for 5 cycles before they killed him for refusing to give up hiding coordinates. He stepped closer. I was raised in a steel box, trained to slit throats before I knew how to tie my boots. My teachers were electric pain and cold meals. My bedtime story was a drone's kill count. His eyes narrowed. I died in that facility. What's walking now is what you made. The timer on the EMP charge ticked down. 3, 2. Enjoy the silence, he said. The blast hit like thunder. The chamber exploded in a silent flash. The lights blew out. The relay tower died. The comm grid across 100 systems went black. Admiral Dravik vanished in the chaos. Back aboard the Revenant, the commander stood in the war room, face lit by emergency lights. The mission was a success, Nira said, though her voice lacked celebration. Enemy fleets are scrambling, Rick added. Half the core systems just went dark. Empire comms are eating themselves alive. The commander nodded slowly. Good. Torin stood in the corner, silent. Finally he spoke. Do you ever feel anything? He asked. Quietly. Not accusatory. Just lost. The commander looked at him. No. Torin nodded. I think that's the saddest part. He walked out. The room fell silent. Out in space, as the Revenant vanished again into the dark, Imperial systems screamed. And on Velkaran Prime, the Emperor stood over a burning holomap. They hadn't just lost communication. They'd lost control. For the first time in a century. The Empire felt hunted. The Imperial star charts called it Draxian 4, a logistical world orbiting the red dwarf Nursai, known for nothing but fuel refining, convoy coordination, and storage of military surplus. No cities, no nobles, just mechanics, soldiers, and freighters. But it was the Empire's beating heart for fleet resupply east of the Velkaran core, which made it the perfect next target. Inside the dim-lit war room of the Revenant, projections hovered in the air. Troop movement charts, surveillance data, supply line estimates. The crew gathered in silence, each face worn from sleep deprivation and pressure. The commander stood with arms behind his back, eyes fixed on the rotating hologram of Draxian's orbit. They'll expect another relay strike, Nira said, tapping a console. Military installations, comm stations, sensor arrays. They'll brace for that. The commander nodded. Exactly why we don't. Rick scratched at his beard, eyes narrowing. You want to hit a refueling base? No, I want to shut it down. Torin leaned in. Disable the base. No, the commander said. Shut down the entire supply line, burn the reserves, collapse the hub. Won't that hurt civilian transport too? Torin asked, hesitant. The commander's eyes didn't move from the display. There are no civilians in this war. Silence followed. Even Nira glanced sideways at him. We're trying to remind the galaxy what they did to Earth, not turn into the Empire. He finally turned, his gaze heavy. You want mercy? That was buried with the last Terran child. He walked out. On Velkaran Prime, Admiral Dravik stood in the hidden chamber beneath the Imperial Palace. A place so old, even the walls whispered in languages forgotten by history. Before her stood the Ether Council, not politicians, not generals, but architects of war and silence. Dravik had been summoned, not ordered. That alone carried weight. The eldest of them, eyes covered in a gold mesh veil, spoke first. "You let him live." Dravik didn't flinch. Killing him in that moment would have turned him into a martyr. He's more useful alive, for now. Another voice, older and harsher, echoed through the chamber. "You played with fire. It's spreading." She stepped forward. "Then give me the weapon that was promised, the fail-safe." The council looked at one another. Finally, the gold-veiled speaker gestured. A panel hissed open. Inside, cryoglass, thick wiring, a breathing hiss, and inside the pod, a figure, scarred, pale, muscles tensed even in sleep, and eyes glowing faint red behind closed lids. Subject 5B, codename Hades. "Another ghost son," she whispered. The council nodded. "Born from the same facility as the Revenant. Older, stronger, genetically unstable. Why wasn't he used before? Too violent. No loyalty." She smiled coldly. "That's exactly what I need." Back on the Revenant, Nira found the commander alone in the weapons control chamber. "You keep pushing them," she said quietly. He didn't answer. "They're loyal, but scared. They've seen what happens when anger becomes the mission." He leaned against the rail. "Fear keeps them sharp. It also breaks them." He turned to her. "I wasn't born to lead. I was trained to kill. What we're doing now? This is mercy, compared to what they taught me." She stared at him for a long moment. "Do you even know how to stop?" His jaw tensed. "I don't think any of us do." In the outer colonies, things were changing. Rumors spread like wildfire. A human ship that couldn't die. A Terran ghost flying through the dark, striking where the Empire felt safest. Some said it was vengeance, others said it was justice, and some, the desperate, began to rise. On Karna Outpost, a freighter captain named Boz hijacked an Empire ore convoy and broadcast a message in old Terran dialect. "We remember Earth. We remember the lies. Revenant, if you hear this, you're not alone." On Deltavir, an entire platoon of Imperial conscripts laid down their weapons and disappeared into the tundra. The rebellion was still a whisper, but it was growing. And every whisper said the same thing. Humanity never died. It was waiting. In Draxian orbit, the Revenant moved beneath the gravity well, skimming the atmosphere's edge, using ion clouds to mask its signature. Inside the ship, tension was boiling. Torin stood in the lower galley with Rick, voice low. "He's slipping." Rick didn't respond. Torin pushed harder. "We're becoming what we hate. The last mission, now this. Fuel depots? Civilians?" Rick looked up. "You think Earth burned because we were too cruel? No. Earth burned because we believed the Empire cared about rules." "That doesn't mean we stop caring." Rick stared at him. "You want to survive? Then understand this. The commander isn't leading us down a path. He is the path." Meanwhile, the commander stood in his private quarters, eyes fixed on a red, blinking light. A message, scrambled and encoded. It was from Karna Outpost, a freighter captain claiming to be a survivor of the Terran trade colonies, asking to join, offering intel. It could be bait. It could be hope. He tapped the console, encrypting a return path. "We strike Draxian. Then, we make contact." Behind his eyes, a flicker of doubt. Small, distant, but real. Admiral Dravik stood aboard her new command ship, the Imperious Black. Beside her, the cryopod of Subject 5B was thawing, the glass fogged, Alarms pulsed, a hiss as seals unlocked. He rose like death-given flesh, no words, just red eyes. Her voice was steady. You were built to kill ghosts. He cracked his knuckles, eyes burning into hers. Then point me at the graveyard. On Draxion, the strike came at dawn. The Revenant pierced the atmosphere like a black spear, dropping pods through refinery skylines and storage platforms. No warnings, no mercy. Rick led the assault on the West Depot, cutting through fuel lines and defense turrets like a reaper. Torin stayed aboard, monitoring reactor balance, hands shaking as civilian ships tried to flee below. I don't see soldiers, he whispered into the comm. I see people. The commander's voice cut through. Cold. We're not here for names, we're here for scars. Burn it. Torin hesitated, then flipped the breaker. Fuel cores ruptured. Draxion lit up like a funeral pyre. Back on the Revenant, the crew didn't cheer. They didn't speak. They simply drifted back into the void. Engines low, lights dimmed, shadows crawling. And in the war room, the commander stood alone, staring at his reflection in the cracked metal of the console. Not a leader. Not a soldier. Just a ghost. Trying to make the galaxy remember why it feared the dark. The hangar on Karna outpost smelled like scorched rust and ion grease. Freighter hulls lined the walls, held together with scrap and spite. Makeshift guards in repainted armor stood nervous as the Revenant's dropship hissed into place. When the ramp lowered and the commander stepped out in full gear, cloak draped, rifle across his back, everyone froze. They didn't expect a myth to walk, a man built like a storm. Cold eyes, no medals, no speech, just presence. Captain Boz, the ex-Imperial who sent the message, swallowed hard and stepped forward. Commander, welcome. He didn't answer. Just scanned the room. No signs of an ambush, no obvious setup. But still he saw nervousness in every twitch, fear in every face. These weren't warriors. They were survivors. Rick and Nira followed behind him, scanning the perimeter. Torin remained on the ship, still shaken after Draxion. The commander finally spoke. You sent the signal. Boz nodded. We've been listening for years. Pirate chatter, sensor ghosts, rumors, and then Draxion burned. He stepped closer, voice low. You're not just a ghost anymore. You're a beacon. The commander didn't like that word. I'm not a symbol, he said. I'm the consequence. Boz held his ground. Same thing, in the end. Inside Karna's war room, barely more than a hollowed-out cargo bay, the Resistance briefed him. 12 colonies had cut off Imperial data access in protest of the Draxion bombing. 6 garrisons went dark, and one planet, Oris Prime, had declared full planetary rebellion. Their first move was to raise an old Terran flag. The commander listened in silence as Boz explained. You could lead all of it, not just a ship, a fleet, an uprising. These people need something real to follow. Rick raised an eyebrow. And they think he's that? Boz shrugged. The Empire doesn't fear diplomats, it fears fire. That's what you are. The commander stared at the old Terran star flag, stitched into a cloth nailed to the wall. He didn't speak. Not for a long time. Then finally, we're not an army. We're a memory. Boz stepped forward. That's all revolutions ever are. Memories with teeth. Back on the Revenant, Nira walked into engineering where Torin sat, knees bouncing, tools scattered around him. You're still shaken. I watched a depot full of techs and miners burn alive last week. You think I'm not shaken? She crouched next to him. They burned Earth first. You think the Empire asked if our kids were soldiers? Torin looked up at her. You sound like him. She flinched slightly. I'm nothing like him, she said. But she wasn't sure anymore. Above the system, on board the Imperious Black, Admiral Dravik watched as the chamber doors sealed behind her. Inside stood Subject 5B, now awake, now aware. They didn't keep him in a uniform, just restraints and injectors. Muscles twitched under skin that looked stitched together. His back bore the faded numbers. GS-05B. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He didn't speak unless ordered. Dravik watched him through the reinforced glass. "Do you know who you're meant to kill?" she asked. He turned slowly toward her, voice low, gravelly. Almost human. "The Stray. Can you find him?" He nodded. "His blood sings, same origin, same pain." Dravik smiled faintly. "Then go. Make the ghost bleed." The chamber hissed open, and the galaxy welcomed back something worse than death. Later that night, back aboard the Revenant, the commander stood alone in the observation chamber. Stars drifted by. Each one could hold a memory or a war crime. He heard the door open, but didn't turn. Rick stepped in, quiet, heavy. "Boz wants us to help rally Oris Prime." "I heard. He wants to name a fleet after the ship. Revenant Armada. Put your face on banners." The commander's shoulders tightened. "I didn't burn half my life away to become a poster." "You burned half your life to make them pay. You've done that." "Now what?" He didn't answer. Rick walked closer. "I fought for Earth. Not for fame. Not for politics. But if we walk away now, we leave the next generation with nothing but fear." The commander stared ahead. "I don't know how to be anything but this." "You could learn." He finally looked at Rick, eyes dark, tired. "They didn't leave anything in me to learn with." That night, a fire broke out in weapons control. It wasn't an accident. Nira moved fast to contain it. The crew responded. No lives lost. But when she traced the ignition point, it led to a sabotage charge, planted, timed, set to overload the ship's cannon core during the next battle. She marched to the bridge, face like stone. The commander turned as she entered. "We have a traitor," she said flatly. He didn't react. "Who?" She shook her head. "Not sure yet, but they wanted us dead, from inside." He looked around the bridge. The silence was sharper than gunfire. "Lock every corridor. Double shift every access point. No one moves alone until we find them." "And if we don't?" Rick asked. The commander didn't blink. "Then we stop trusting anyone." 2 days later. A signal pierced the galaxy like a blade. It didn't come from the Empire. It came from a derelict zone, dead space near the Muralithic expanse. Just a pulse, a Terran comm signature, corrupted, distorted, wrapped in static. But old, and it carried one word, Revenant. The commander stood still as it repeated. Nira whispered, "That's bait." Torin said, "It's a trap." Rick muttered, "Or it's one of ours." The commander didn't flinch. "Set course. No cloaks, no stealth." "Why?" Nira asked. He looked out the viewport. "Because if it's bait, I want them to know we're biting." Meanwhile, Subject 5B stood on the hull of a scout ship, watching the void with naked eyes. His skin cracked from overexposure, but his body unfazed. He didn't need protection. He didn't need a ship. He was bred to find one man. He didn't need scanners. He felt the commander's pulse. Their blood was too close, too identical. One the failed prototype, one the perfected execution, and like a predator watching prey. He smiled. The Revenant dropped into the Muralith expanse at 300 ship time. Silent wreckage floated ahead. Old Empire ships, broken and drifting, the aftermath of a forgotten battle. Rick adjusted the scanners. "We're getting echoes." Nira frowned. "Visual." The hollow lit up. Something floated just beyond the drift, a body, tethered to a broken hull, not dead, not breathing either, just waiting. "Get us out of here," Torin said quickly, but it was too late. A pulse erupted from the body, massive, blinding, raw. Every screen on the Revenant went white. Then, boom, impact. Shields crashed. Lights died. Backup systems kicked in. Alarms blared, and the commander whispered, "He found us." The Revenant spun in low rotation, damaged and drifting through the muralithic expanse, its hull bleeding light and vapor trails. The trap had been triggered, and now they were exposed, vulnerable. But worse than the trap was what came after. Nira sprinted through the corridor toward the breach warning. Her boots pounded against the deck plating, emergency lights flashing red along the walls. She turned the corner just as Section B-12 erupted in sparks. She saw him for the first time. Subject 5B. He stood in the middle of the fire, unbothered by flames, smoke, or pain. No armor, just torn tactical cloth and skin that looked surgically grown. His eyes were feral red, glowing in the dark like a beast's. One hand held the twisted remains of a security droid. The other was dripping blood, human blood. A crewman tried to fire. 5B moved faster than anything Nira had ever seen. He didn't dodge. He was just already somewhere else. A bone-crunching slam, a wet gurgle. Silence. Then he looked at her and smiled. On the bridge, the commander stood still. Rick's voice came over comms, frantic. "We've got a hostile on board. It's him. It's one of ours, but wrong." The commander didn't flinch. He already knew who it was. "Lock down every access corridor," he ordered. "Route all emergency doors to manual. Contain him." Torin's voice cracked through the chaos. "He's tearing through the lower decks, like he knows the layout. Like he's been here." The commander's voice was ice. "He has." Down on Deck 3, Nira dragged the injured crewman into a side corridor, heart hammering. She'd seen combat. She'd fought Empire shock troopers and black site mercs. But this was different. This was a ghost out of their own past. She hit her comm. "Target is moving with full knowledge of the ship. He bypassed our security doors without hacking. He's using old Ghost Sun protocols." The reply came flat and calm. "Fall back to the command corridor," the commander said. "I'll deal with him." Subject 5B walked the halls of the Revenant like it belonged to him. Every bulkhead, every turn, every alcove. He knew it by instinct, because he was bred in the same hell as the commander. But where the commander had escaped the system, fought to remember what it meant to be human, 5B had become what the system wanted. Perfect, obedient, monstrous. The bridge lights flickered. Then everything went dark. Backup systems rerouted emergency power. The commander turned to Torin. "Reroute all battery to Corridor B. Keep the rest dark." "You going down there?" He nodded once. Rick stepped in. "You shouldn't face him alone." "I'm not facing a man," the commander replied. "I'm facing the version of me that never got out." The hull to B level was quiet. Too quiet. No alarms now, just the soft hum of the reactor echoing through steel. The commander moved slow, deliberate. Pulse rifle in one hand, combat blade on his back. His eyes adjusted to the low light like a predator in the dark. Then, a whisper. "Still slow." He turned. Nothing. Another voice, closer. "They told me you died in the collapse. I told them you didn't." "Why?" the commander asked into the dark. "Because I could still feel you." The shadows shifted, and 5B stepped out, barefooted, blood smeared across his neck like war paint. "You survived," 5B said. "You escaped the cage, and instead of finishing what we were built for, you chose to play captain." The commander raised his rifle. "I chose to fight for something other than obedience." 5B grinned. "Obedience? No. We were made to break things, to destroy. You think your little rebellion matters? You think wearing a jacket and giving orders makes you better? The commander's grip tightened. You're not a leader, 5B continued. You're just a ghost with a louder scream. He lunged. The first blow shattered the bulkhead behind the commander. He barely dodged it, rolling back, firing 3 shots. One grazed 5B's side, but he didn't even flinch. Pain meant nothing. The two clashed in the narrow corridor, brutal and primal. Fist against steel, blade against bone. 5B caught the commander's arm and drove him into the wall, hard enough to dent the panel. You've gone soft, he snarled. The commander slammed a knee into his chest, grabbed the combat blade from his back, and drove it into 5B's side. 5B laughed. Actually laughed. I missed this? The commander's face didn't change. I didn't. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Nira ran the security trace. Blood pressure spiked. The fight was isolated, but the ship couldn't take much more damage. Then she saw it. A relay command initiated from inside engineering, an unauthorized system reboot. Her stomach dropped. Someone's disabling the lockdown protocols. She turned and locked eyes with Torin. He froze. No, she whispered. I didn't want it to happen like this, he said. I thought if I gave them access, they'd just disable the ship. Not kill, not like this. You betrayed us. I saved us, he snapped. You're following a madman. You think he's going to lead a rebellion? He's going to burn the galaxy down. Nira pulled her pistol. You're not walking out of this. Torin didn't run. He just dropped to his knees. I never wanted this. But the damage was done. In the lower deck, the battle raged. The commander and 5B slammed through a maintenance corridor, sparks and metal raining around them. Both bleeding now, both breathing heavy. But only one felt the weight of what he was fighting for. 5B grabbed him by the throat, lifting him. They taught us pain, but you still cling to some idea that you're more than a weapon. The commander's hand found the broken wiring behind the panel. He gritted his teeth, pulled it. The arc surge shocked them both. But 5B took the full blast. His body spasmed, dropped him. The commander rolled, gasping, burned, but alive. You're right, he said. I am a weapon. He grabbed the blade from the floor. But I choose my target. He drove it through 5B's heart, or where the heart should have been. 5B choked, blood spilling, smiling even as he collapsed. Good, he said. Be the killer they trained you to be. Then silence. The commander stood there, shaking, not from pain, but from what it took to win. Back on the bridge, Nira sat beside Torin in the brig. He looked hollow. They said they'd leave us alone if I helped them find the commander. You believed them. I was tired, he whispered. Tired of watching death. She stared through the bars. So now you get to watch more. Later that night, the commander stood over the body of 5B, now stored in a sealed containment chamber. Reek stepped in. Crew's shaken. Good. You're bleeding. The commander looked down, cuts across his arms, chest. He didn't feel them. I want this ship back in black stealth mode by morning. We move toward Oris Prime. Rick nodded, then hesitated. He was you, wasn't he? The commander stared at the glass. No, he said. He was what they wanted me to be. Rick didn't speak. The commander turned away. But I'm not done deciding who I become. The sky above Oris Prime was already burning. Smoke coiled over shattered towers. Anti-air fire stitched lines across the clouds, and the ground pulsed with the thunder of marching Imperial walkers. The rebellion had started too early, moved too fast, and now they were paying the price. From orbit, the Revenant watched it all. Rick stood at the observation deck, jaw tight. They're getting butchered down there. Resistance fighters barely holding the North District, civilians caught in the middle. Nira looked over the tactical display. The Imperials brought in orbital suppression cruisers. The whole city will be turned to rubble in hours. The commander said nothing. He stood in silence, staring down at the fire below. Torin sat in the far corner, cuffed, eyes hollow. "They're losing," he said quietly, "and if you go down there, you'll lose with them." The commander turned. "No," he said. "I'm not going down there to lose." In the Revenant's warbay, every remaining soldier suited up. The dropships were prepped. Their numbers were thin, barely 2 squads fit for combat. Most were engineers, medics, technicians, survivors. But none hesitated. The commander stood in front of them, helmet in hand. Body bruised from his fight with Subject 5B, but unshaken. "I'm not going to promise survival," he said. "You've followed me through shadows and blood. You've burned depots, collapsed systems, and outlived everything the galaxy threw at us." He held up a cracked Terran patch, scorched and faded. "They killed Earth, but they didn't kill what Earth stood for." He looked every one of them in the eyes. "We don't go down there to save a city. We go down there to prove they never finished the job." Nira stepped beside him. "We go to remind them that humanity doesn't kneel, it remembers." The hangar roared to life. Oris Prime. North District. The resistance was collapsing. Imperial walkers stomped through burning streets. Drones swept alleys with thermal scans. Civilians were herded like cattle into open squares. The planet's surface had become a graveyard in motion. Captain Boz clutched a bleeding wound, ducked behind the wreckage of a ground transport. His squad was down to 5. The comms were dead. He was already whispering a prayer when the sky tore open. Dropships screamed down from the clouds, fast, low, weaving through flak fire like shadows. The lead ship bore the mark, not of a planet, not of a fleet, of a ghost. Boz blinked, then started laughing. Broken, wild laughter. "It's him," he muttered. "It's the Revenant." The dropship landed hard, ramps blasting open. The commander hit the ground running, rifle raised, Nira at his side. Rick's boots shook the pavement behind them. The street exploded as an Imperial drone turned to engage. But the commander was faster. He dropped to one knee, fired once, headshot. Sparks flew. The drone collapsed. All around them the battlefield shifted. Resistance fighters who had been ready to die now surged forward, screaming war cries. The ghost had come. Hope had arrived. Admiral Dravik watched the feed from orbit, her face carved in stone. "He's alive," her comms officer said. "I know," she said. "And leading them." She stared out the viewport. "Deploy orbital strike in 5 minutes. Level the district." "Ma'am, our forces are still engaged." "I said level it." She turned away from the screen. "If they want to follow a ghost, let them die like one." Back on the ground, the Revenant crew carved a path toward the civilian prison square. Rick dropped a mech soldier with a shoulder-fired slug round. Nira cut power to the defense grid. Boz rejoined them with the last of his squad, wide-eyed. "We're getting slaughtered out here." "Not anymore," the commander said. He pointed to the guard tower. "Cut the feed. We jam their sensor net." "I can climb it," Boz said. "You're wounded." "I don't care." The commander looked at him, and for once, nodded. Boz smiled, teeth bloody, and sprinted into the fire. The orbital strike came without warning. A line of fire slashed through the sky. The Revenant, still in low orbit, took the brunt, automated defenses engaging just in time. Plasma shields held, barely, but power began dropping fast. Torin, still in cuffs, looked up from the bridge as the alarm screamed. "I can stabilize the reactor," he said to the deck officer, "but I need to be unshackled." The officer stared at him. "Please," Torin said, "I won't fix my betrayal, but I can make sure the ship doesn't fall." The officer hesitated, then released the lock. On the ground, the commander's comms buzzed. "Strike coming," the voice crackled. "Target, your district." He looked up. The sky was glowing red. He tapped his comm. "Torin, give me something." Back on the Revenant, Torin's hands flew across the controls, sweat pouring down his face. "I can't stop the beam, but I can redirect it." "To where?" Torin looked at the ship's positioning data. Then his own face hardened. "The Imperial cruiser feeding it." "Are you sure?" "No," he said, "but you taught me something." "What?" "Sometimes fire is all that's left." The commander turned to Nira. "Get the civilians out of the square." "What about you?" He looked up again at the fire falling from the heavens. "I'll make sure it doesn't land." He took off toward the city's central relay station, the only structure with a signal tower strong enough to override the targeting system. Boz's voice came over the comm. "I'm at the tower, but I need you to make the call." The commander climbed the final steps, blood in his mouth, lungs burning. "Patch me through." Boz linked the comms. The commander looked out over the ruined city, then whispered, "Let it end here." In orbit, the Revenant's cannons rotated. Target, Imperial cruiser, Vengeance class. Torin hit the final sequence. On the surface, the beam began to fall. And at the last moment, it twisted. The cruiser never had time to react. It was designed to dish out pain, not take it. The strike hit its engine core. The explosion lit up the night like a second sun. Dravik's fleet shattered in the sky. Silence. Then, cheers, on the ground, in the streets, in the rubble, across the radios, everywhere. The civilians were free, the rebels were standing, and the sky, for the first time in years, belonged to no one. Hours later, on the steps of the Oris Prime Capitol building, the commander stood before the largest gathering he'd ever seen. Fighters, survivors, children holding scraps of flags older than they were. He didn't want to speak, but he did, not because he had the words, because they needed to hear them. "Years ago," he said, voice rough, "I was trained to be a weapon, a tool to serve those who burned my world." He looked over the crowd. "But something happened. I survived, and in surviving, I remembered." He held up his fist, bloodied and shaking. "They thought they could erase Earth. They were wrong." More silence. Then Boz stepped forward, raised his own fist. "We remember." Then another, then more. Across the square, fists rose. 1,000 voices echoed. "We remember." Back aboard the Revenant, Torin sat in engineering, breathing heavy. Nira walked in, dropped a ration bar next to him. "You did good," she said. He didn't look at her. "I'm not proud of what I did." "Then don't be, but be better now." She walked away, and for the first time in weeks, Torin let himself cry. In deep orbit, away from the celebration, the commander stood in the observation deck, alone. Rick joined him. "You're a legend now," Rick said. "I never wanted that." "Doesn't matter. You've got a fleet forming. Systems rising. The ghost became the fire." The commander looked at his own reflection in the glass. "I'm not a symbol." "No," Rick said. "You're worse. You're the reminder that the Empire never won." Final transmission. From Revenant Command. To all outer colonies encrypted signal. Old Terran protocols. This is not over. The Empire still stands, but it's bleeding, and it knows now we never left. We never forgot, and we will never kneel. We are the broken. We are the buried. We are the return. We remember.